Hello beautiful people. So thank you for clicking on my video. Today's video is to summarize what happened in the Tyre Nichols case. Some of you have been watching various parts of various videos on the internet and have reached out to me asking me for my opinion or to basically summarize what happened. So please stay towards the end of this video because I want to kind of tell you my personal opinion on it. But this is a case where the police department basically assigned a group of officers called the Scorpio unit to basically go out there and combat all different types of crimes. In some cities, like I worked as part of the tactical patrol units, and we were asked to go out there and enforce laws that patrol officers simply do not have the time to commit to. Patrol officers are responding to calls, they're more on a reactive mode. So in order to be proactive, police departments create these special units, and in this case, for the incident that happened with the Nichols incident, you have the Scorpio units, a group of very proactive officers who are on patrol. They don't have to handle calls, they just focus on other things. And so in this incident, they were focusing on a reckless driver, and they identified Nichols as being that reckless driver. And so that's the only part that I recognize as being law enforcement ethical, following policy as part of this case, is the fact that they suspected Nichols of reckless driving. From this point forward, I don't know what in the world happened, but I'm going to kind of break it down for you. These officers run up to the car like they're Rambo and basically just start treating Nichols with disrespect, trying to pull him out of the car. You got multiple officers giving directions to Nichols. Some are telling him to get on the ground, other officers are telling him to turn around, flip upside down, whatever. And again, this is totally outside of protocol and training. When I was a police officer, we were trained on how to do traffic stops, felony takedowns, etc. And the videos that I have watched are way outside of the scope. So anyway, these officers
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder ahead.
These officers are first, walk up there without following department policies. Nichols is stopped in the middle of the road from what I see at a red light. And so they didn't activate their emergency lights, let him pull over to the right in a safe spot, etc. And instead, what did they do? They go up there and start yelling at him. And from that point on, everything went downhill. The officers are trying to fight with them. He appears to be scared. He appears to be surprised. And I wonder if he questioned, like, what is going on. People question authority nowadays. They want to know, what are you doing? The sooner you tell them what you're doing, the less you'll have complaints later on. So they should have said, hey, we stopped you for reckless driving. You need to see your license, registration, proof of insurance. A lot of you have seen this, where they basically are, the driver's asked to present driver's license, registration, proof of insurance. I mean, that's like nationwide. But so anyway, what happens next is this guy starts, getting squirrely because he feels like something could be happening that's pretty scary. So he jumps up and takes off running. And so an officer tries to tase him. Eventually they catch him at an intersection and they have him on the ground and they're trying to control him. And these officers are ignoring everything in terms of UDT, unarmed defensive tactics, that I learned in the police academy and subsequent years. They basically just started, they were standing up trying to control a person who was on the ground. These guys were significantly larger in size than Nichols, which I'm surprised that not one of them, grabbed the arm, held him down, did whatever happens. And then you see the use of taser as totally out of control. Again, it's outside of department policy, blew my mind when I saw this. And then you have an officer deploying the OC spray. Now, you have mace and you have OC spray. And as a police officer, half the time mace didn't work and definitely didn't work on dogs. So I started carrying OC spray. The issue with OC spray is if you're in a large crowd of people, they're not dispersing, you spray them, okay, fine, to get them back in terms of a riot situation. Or you have a suspect that's not cooperating and you have ample distance to spray him and step back. But when you're in a physical confrontation, in this case, such as the officers were with Nichols, it is not a good idea to spray OC spray because it's going to contaminate the whole area and other officers are going to be affected by it. And that's what happened. One of the officers got sprayed with OC spray that was deployed by another officer, and that officer that was sprayed got up and he's having trouble breathing, which OC spray, that's what it does to you. Affects your breathing, affects your, orientation, etc. And then you have that officer, and this is on the camera in the poll, coming up to Nichols or another officer and kick him in the head. And again, I've watched this several times. There's no defense whatsoever for that type of behavior. I don't know if these officers forgot all about training, common sense, that they're a human being, policing tactics, everything is out the window. And then you have them after the fact lying on police reports, or they were on body camera explaining what happened, embellishing. Okay, this is a problem. Some officers in the past used to embellish. This is before body cameras, etc. Now with video and videos documenting everything that is happening, you cannot simply embellish. In my classes as a professor, I'm telling my students hey, you need to say the facts. Not your opinion, not what you think happened or you think should happen, what happened, and that's what you got to say. And so in Nichols' case, these officers totally went outside of training, and the fact that he's down on the ground and obviously in distress, and that finally takes a while for them to sit him back up, and then it takes 20 minutes for the paramedics to arrive, and then I don't know what happened. Of course, Nichols passed away, sadly, 3 days later. And you're trying to get into law enforcement, or you're in law enforcement. This is an opportunity for you to watch these videos and learn what not to do as a police officer, right? It's hard to escalate something so fast with so little and then try to resolve the situation, right? And we sit here and say, well, why did Nichols run? Well, he saw 4 out-of-control police officers, right? Basically, he was afraid for his life. What are these guys going to do? If they're treating him like this on a traffic stop, what's next, right? I'm sure what's running through his mind was just terrible. And I'm telling you, there's no excuse. So that's my summary. Be careful about watching the news. They're going to be bashing. And I feel bad for those of you who are still out there trying to improve your community, trying to keep your community safe, because sadly there's going to be the citizens who watch news 24/7, and this is what they're going to be thinking that all the police are doing. And I'm here to tell you that's not what all the police are doing. There are some bad apples in some organizations, and I'm actually glad that they're being identified and they're being removed. But every organization out there, every single organization has people that are part of the L unit, which is the lazy unit, and there's people in those organizations that ignore policies, violate policy, commit crimes, such as stealing from their employer, or embellishing reports, or lying on reports, etc. And so, if you're thinking about getting into law enforcement, do not let this scare you. I am happy that they were charged. Those officers, what they did was unexcusable. I think they went outside of what was expected of them as sworn peace officers. So anyway, let me spend a couple minutes just talking about training. Those of you who get hired as peace officers will go through peace officer training in the police academy. You'll have academic, knowledge that you have to understand, elements of crime, criminal law, etc. You have, unarmed defensive tactics training that you have to learn what to do as a police officer, as a deputy sheriff, as a high patrol, etc., state patrol, and state trooper, and then you have shooting. Where how do you operate a handgun, how do you hit a target, where to place your shots, etc. Then you have driving, how to drive a patrol car. In some states, some departments allow pit maneuvers. Officers have to go through special training to do pit maneuvers. And then back to unarmed defensive tactics. Some of you know karate, jiu-jitsu. Guess what? In law enforcement, we don't want you using that, because that is not a post-approved training, peace officer standards and training. So be very careful, those of you who are going to enter law enforcement and you think you're going to be able to use jiu-jitsu. No, your department wants you to follow post guidelines, because the only way they will ever be able to testify in court that you did the right thing is if you follow department guidelines, which is approved by post, and that's the only thing you can do. Now, once you get out of the police academy, you're going to go through patrol, a field training program, FTO officer program, and I have some videos on that. You should watch those, what to say, what not to say, how to act, not to act. But you'll learn how to do traffic stops, and you'll learn how to handle yourself in police pursuits and how to respond to police calls for service. Trust me, your training officers are going to go through all of that. I was a training officer, and I went through all of that with my trainees. Now, if you look at the Nichols case, these officers, and I know I'm repeating myself, ignored every single training guideline there is out there. When you make a traffic stop, you got to get the car out of traffic into a safe area where it's going to be not hit by other cars or put you in jeopardy. You're in control of the traffic stop, so you can get on the PA system and say, excuse me, sir, ma'am, move the car to the right, etc. There's no hurry to get up there and do what these officers did. There's absolutely no excuse. Now, there are some instances that officers have to make a split-second decision in very serious cases, right? There's been a shooting, a school shooting. This guy has, killed several people, caused 20 wrecks. The supervisors say, hey, do what it takes to get that guy off the road. Yeah, while he stopped at a red light, you're gonna run up there. He's wanted for multiple felonies, serious felonies, murder, etc. And you're gonna have to get up there. You're gonna have to get out of your car and do what these officers did. The issue with Nichols, that was not the case. Reckless driving is a misdemeanor. One of my previous videos, I talked about, misdemeanor, felony, when you can arrest, that kind of thing, right? And so, even here in California, where I was a police officer, you have officers who make traffic stops for people who break traction, right? Some cars have a really high amount of torque, horsepower, and when they're stopped at a red light, they, maybe it's wet and they break a little traction. And some overzealous officers pull people over like that and say, hey, that's reckless driving because you broke traction. I work patrol a lot, and it's a little bit on the extreme side. Now, somebody who drives over 100 miles an hour and is zigzagging in and out of traffic and blowing stop signs and putting other people in danger, a police officer in danger who's chasing him, that's a whole different thing than a person who's at the red light and then hits the gas and then it breaks a little bit of traction. It's important for us to talk about this because those of you who enter law enforcement, you're going to have a lot of discretion in some of these instances, right? Again, reckless driving is a misdemeanor. It's a mediocre crime. It's not a major crime. So the way these officers walked up there and responded is not there. One last thing on this video. I know it's easy to Monday night quarterback these incidents, and I know it's easy to critique them when the news media does not realize that when they post these incidents, they're forgetting about the millions of people who are working every day in law enforcement to protect your community, to protect your rights, to make communities safer, etc. It's sad because this incident will affect a lot of those people who before people would look up to, shake their hand, etc. It's going to take some time for that healing to occur. Just like in the Rodney King incident, it took a long time for the community to regain trust. Police reform is needed. I've said this for years, and I still see police departments retiring problem officers and then hiring them as background investigators as the ones who select the future type of officer in that department. And so hopefully one of these days an administrator or a police chief will be watching these videos, a politician will be watching these videos and say, what a concept, okay? We retire officers that have had problems in that department, and then we're hiring that same officers back part-time to do background investigations, to be the ones that decide which ones get hired and which ones don't get hired, right? So I recommend that cities start looking at who their background investigators are. I recommend that they start using outside agencies to screen these backgrounds for future peace officers, so that we start getting police departments that are more representative of the community that they serve. So when I was in my department, and it was a large department, I was one officer that spoke, my language, but then I think there were maybe 3 or 4 bilingual officers. Now, I got called out all the time to interpret, right? And so that was a huge need at the time. There was a huge need to be bilingual, to be But again, I want you to think about this, right? If a community is 60%, for example, Hispanic, and the department is only 5% Hispanic, is it representing the community? And this is where community policing tactics come in. And if you're listening to this, and you're an applicant, you start thinking about, these are the points, right? These are the points. The only way to start minimizing incidents like the Tyre Nichols incident is to praise and promote the good guys, the ones that follow policy, that represent the community, that respect the community. That's the only way it's ever going to change, right? Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be criticism, and people are always going to be saying, you're pulling me over for this, you're pulling me over for that. And I could sit here and tell you that it's real, sadly. The whole economic factor of, if you drive a brand new car, you're going to get pulled over less than if you're driving a used car, that the lights are going to be burned out, etc. So that's a whole conversation for another time. But what I do hope after this video is that you learned a few things. Mainly that the police are the public and the public are the police. If you're a public servant, you have to understand who you're serving. You're serving the community that elected you into that position. And so you can't go outside of what you were elected for. You have to represent the job. You have to respect the job. Read the law enforcement code of ethics so that you don't make the mistakes that these officers made, right? Listen, I thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, put a like so that it helps the algorithm, and share this video with someone who needs this type of advice. If you're listening to the video and you're an active police officer, there's never a better time than today to start reassessing how you respond to calls, reassessing how you talk to people, how you treat people, how you talk to your supervisors, what you are writing on your police reports. Because with those video cameras, you better be monitoring or reviewing the videos before you write those police reports. As a college professor, I'm always giving you this type of advice. I want the best for you, and that's why I share these things in these videos. So on the comments, please say if you want anything else that you want me to discuss. If you have something personal, you can always contact me on Instagram via private message. I thank you for listening. Be safe out there. I love you guys, and until the next video.